with respect to the Chinese government, when they say they're going to do something, chances are very high they're going to do it. And in contrast, for example, to our State of the Union, which is basically a speech about the future and about hope, the Chinese have a thing they call the equivalent in China is the Chinese work report, which tells you exactly what they actually did for real and what they're going to do for real. It's a completely different document. All right. Now, I just want to read you one thing here, though, that sort of captures, I think, a very good sentiment. Bear with me here 1 second. Okay, here we are. The power configuration in the current world should not be defined as competition between China and the United States for hegemony. Rather, we witness a shift from the situation in which a single civilization dominated the globe to common prosperity of diverse civilizations. What China has inaugurated is not a Chinese century, but a century of diverse civilizations, a new era in which there will no longer be a single civilizational hegemon. And that's exactly the way the Chinese see it. As opposed to, Joe Biden says this is the century of democracies versus autocracies. Some of the funnier, more clever Chinese will say, no, it's the plutocracy versus the meritocracy. Which gets to the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese Communist Party, the best way to think about that is the Chinese Communist Party is essentially the meritocratic elite. And you don't get into the Chinese Communist Party if you're not very able. You don't get to Tsinghua University if you're not very able. 10 million kids a year take the national examinations to go to university. The top 3,000 of those go to Tsinghua University. 3,000 get admitted and 3,000 go. So that the examination-based culture, which has existed for 2,000 years, still exists, and essentially that's what drives the input into all these institutions. And so to put it in the vernacular, if you get to the top of the Chinese system, there's no chance you're not very smart and very able. They've had real jobs. They failed or they succeeded. If they succeeded, they went ahead. If they failed, they failed. And like all big organizations, there, of course, is plenty of rough justice and infighting and all the rest of it that goes on in every corporation in the United States and anywhere else. But that's basically the system. So I think the word communist kind of gets into the mental way of Americans understanding what you're dealing with. It's not a communist system, period. Which doesn't mean they don't have, when they talk about common prosperity, for example, you might say that's the equivalent of trying to fix income inequality that we would talk about. But the other day, another Chinese was saying to me the capitalist system is essentially a divide and conquer system. The Chinese modernization is a unifying system. That common prosperity is for real. They're proud of the fact they've lifted 800 million people out of poverty. Well, that's the most ever in history by a long, long way. And they're proud of that. And they think those people ought to continue to advance.